Alright guys, Ryan here. Welcome back for the third installment of First Time DMing. Um, as you may remember from last time, our party had just arrived at Gorion. They dealt with slavers and had a couple of fun um, RPing interactions in Ravenfall. Upon coming to Gorion, they had a talk with Tarek, who kind of explained the situation at the Temple of Dagon, and pretty immediately into our third session, we headed straight for the old ruins. So basically, what they found here, they found some old ruins that were kind of sitting on top of the old temple. Now you can't see them here because I ended up deleting them instead of just moving them off screen like I normally do. We had two lizard folk here. There was three kind of spread out up here. There was two up on the walls, and then there was another two or three in here. So our party was actually outnumbered for this fight, which was a lot of fun. You could tell that they definitely had a little bit of a challenge with it. One thing that I'd noticed that was kind of funny was the couple of ranged characters that we had actually ignored the archers for the longest time, so they got to pretty much go to work. Um, and yeah, basically the guards that were right here kind of met them at the front. But what I did with the rest of them, these guys kind of hung up for a second to make sure that nothing was coming around from this side. And these guys were kind of holed up in this area. What I really wanted to do was kind of pull them deeper in here so that I could get a little bit of a pincer move and kind of get these guys around to the back line. And I was actually successful in doing so. Um, the fight went on for a while. One of the lizard folk tried to flee for this tunnel here, but was got caught up in the tent. When he got caught up in the tent, it was Christopher, I believe, that ran over and set the tent on fire. So that was kind of an interesting approach. They finished the fight up here, kind of looked down, realized that they couldn't really see what was going on, so they ended up heading down into the temple. When they arrived, they kind of came over in this area is where they kind of arrived in. I forgot to add a little bit to the map, but they all knew where they were and kind of what the situation was. There was just a little door cut into this wall that led into that stairwell that you guys saw on the last map. Um, so our party was all kind of gathered here. There was two lizard folk here and here, and then there was some kind of shaman back here chanting magic. So the party kind of debated on what to do for a minute. Everybody wanted to do distraction except for one of my players. He was like, "We already have the element of surprise. We should just run in there and maul these guys." They ended up settling on the attempting to make a distraction technique. They were going to use the Raven Familiar of the Necromancer. However, recognizing that this was kind of an out of place area for a bird to be, let alone a raven, the lizard folk immediately kind of retreated back a little bit, and the shaman shouted out to a god, Salahara, the Lord of Venom, and he ended up summoning two spiders right here on this large ornate plate sunk in. And one thing that the party noticed is this plate looked like it had been added recently. So the spiders appear. Christopher decides to make a sneak attack against them with a throwing knife. Um, Hits, does a decent amount of damage to the spider, and then the two spiders spring into action along with their two lizard folk comrades. So the four of them, they jump into the party. They're doing pretty good. As soon as this, and the way that I had designed this fight, I wanted it to be kind of a multi-tiered fight where there was minions continually coming in and it got progressively harder. And what that allowed for, if they really wanted to have gotten creative, they could have tried to blitz somebody back here to attack the shaman and interrupt the ritual. What that would have done is made the fight significantly easier. However, having everything kind of summoning in right here, and one thing I realized I could have done later was draw them further in and then have the creatures get summoned behind them, which would have really added an interesting element to it. But kind of the thing that I was going for at the time was boxing them in this doorway so that the shaman could do all of his work unhindered. Um kind of catching on to that, the artificer started firing crossbow bolts into him. She managed to get two, I believe, for a decent amount of his health. Um, After one of the spiders fell, he ended up summoning a large poisonous snake. Christopher charged the snake and was immediately constricted and attacked. I don't believe the bite actually got him, but on his next round, he ended up breaking free, which was fun. There was a decent little fight that happened between everyone and the snake, and then the snake ended up crushing the artificer's iron defender. Um, After that, he summoned a large. So after that, they kind of started to advance. Like they were still kind of dealing with the snake, and Christopher decided that he kind of wanted to get the glory by killing the shaman. So he started charging forward, but he ended his movement at about here. The shaman, having already taken damage and kind of seeing himself in danger, he walked over to this magical scroll that he had been channeling his magic through. He said some kind of incantation, and then he ended up slicing his own throat open, killing himself. But he ended up, something crawled out of his body, and it ended up being a giant scorpion. Now, Christopher decided he wanted to do this dramatic run for. So basically, what Christopher did, he tried to do that move that you see in a bunch of the movies and things like that, and he slides across the stone floor, making an amazing athletics. Athletics check. Slides under this thing and gets a decent attack to its underbelly. However, he stopped his movement under the scorpion. So on the scorpion's next move, it promptly rolled a critical when it slammed its weight down on him, and it left him gurgling up blood and on the verge of death as it proceeded forth to snatch up Geltz and try to do a bunch of other damage to the party. He ended up dealing a fair amount of damage, and they almost didn't make it to Christopher in time, but they did. Everyone made it. They kind of searched the area. They found some interesting things, and Davrid, being a master or a follower of Dagon, he knows that there's generally secret rooms and things of that nature. And he also kind of got this compelling from Dagon that he should look further. So in the priest quarters under a desk, they found a lever which opened up a back wall here. Upon entering, they find two statues that depict Dagon, and Dagon is a god that I have created for this campaign. He's a trickster god. He kind of resembles a combination of Anubis and the Cheshire Cat. He's just always grinning, always messing with somebody. And they also saw a chest on the opposite wall. Above the chest was an inscription that said, "When the waters reunite, your reward you then must," and the last word looked like it had been scraped off. And they kind of, one person was like, could it be fight? And they kind of debated that probably wasn't it because it didn't really make a lot of sense. Our necromancer tried to see if he could decipher anything arcane about the chest, and it seemed that there is some kind of enchantment on it, but they could not decipher what. The chest was sealed and would not move, budge, or open until whatever this riddle was solved. So they kind of messed around for a minute. They kind of tried a couple of things, and then finally they started taking water out of these side rooms and pouring it into the center pool. As soon as the first bit of water gets poured, they hear kind of this strange chime ring through the air. They add the second one, and then there's this strange magic that kind of flows up out of the water. And you see the water kind of shoot up, and it slams down onto the chest, and everything kind of settles back to normal again. So, Davrid steps forward, puts his hand on the chest, and his hand sticks to the chest, which is a mimic. The mimic attacks the party. There's a decent little fight there. They end up taking it down fairly easily. But as they defeat the chest, it transforms into a furry kind of version of itself. And it actually looks incredibly friendly at this point. Now, Dagon speaks to all of them and explains to them that this is his greatest and most loyal follower and friend. Its name is Chester, and it will follow them around and assist them as best it can. Now, given that Davrid was our priest of Dagon, it kind of clung to him, and it's been kind of following him around since then. But yeah, Chester is, it functions as a bag of holding. However, you have to be a little bit careful what you put in there because when he spits things out, they are covered in saliva. So books and parchment and things like that, you would not want to store in there. But it is, but they do get the sense that it's not like decaying any of the metal items that they've put in there or anything like that. So Chester's a really interesting character. He's just kind of a fun little addition to the party. They know that he can follow basic commands, but they also know that he's not in the turn order. He's not part of combat. There might be a circumstance where he does something crazy at my discretion, but if anything, that'll just be kind of a plot development or something of that nature. Or another thing that I had thought of is maybe at some point something happens to Chester because we know that Davrid's not going to leave him behind. And Chester actually kind of fits into the central campaign, unknown to our party. So that's going to be a whole lot of fun. After dealing with the temple, after dealing with the temple, they headed back to Gorion. They met they met up with Tarek. His comrades had kind of just started to arrive, and he was explaining the situation to them. Our party kind of filled them in on the overall thing, so it seemed like the Harpers were going to go kind of check it out and maybe deal with some of the bodies or what have you. And with that, our party kind of spent the night, had another fun night at the tavern. This time, Christopher did a little bit better for himself, but not too much. Lorne did. He got a little bit drunker than he did last time, but it was still fun. Didn't get too unruly. And with that, the party headed to Talismasia, which was the capital, and that was where we ended this session. They arrived over on this side. Basically, there's this area outside of the city called the Floats, and then there is a kind of gatehouse that leads inside the walls. The walls kind of follows down along the coast here. Oop. There's the gatehouse there, and then it kind of stops along the waterfront, where they would need access. All this gray here is crags. It's like this giant. Basically, this section of the city right here is floating over this giant rocky outcrop, like this giant just chasm underneath. There's just this thin strip of land, and on that thin strip of land is actually where the trade guild is built. So they arrived at the city, and they had a little bit of time to kind of start exploring a little bit. I know the Necromancer Revenant kind of broke off and went and did his own thing. He headed into a small little building on the waterfront. Oh wait, no, that was the next day. All right, so that was the end of the session. Was them just kind of arriving to the city. With that, I'm gonna quickly take a quick break, and I will come back with you guys for the next part of this. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. The temple really kind of set the tone for what's going to be coming next. It kind of showed them that there are going to be much harder fights and that they need to start thinking kind of tactically about things. It punished Christopher for the fancy maneuver he tried to pull, and I was extremely happy that he did that. It was a lot of fun to watch, and the way that things worked out, like the fact that the Scorpion did crit him, worked out perfectly. Like, the whole situation was very, very amusing, and we all had a lot of fun with it. Geltz was even asking who's going to pay for his burial, and he's laying on the floor like, please, guys. This was probably one of the funner sessions this was probably my favorite session so far. There was a lot of fun stuff that happened. The fights were challenging, but they were still doable. There was a riddle they had to figure out. They got a fun little magical item that's not going to completely change the nature of the campaign, but at the same time, it's something useful to them that is also kind of fun and sentient. They got to finally arrive at the capital after all this time. So you got to remember, we do one session a week, and we do about 6 hours. So they've been working on this for a while, and the capital has kind of always been that sight on the horizon. This is what we're heading to. And they each kind of have their own personal investment here in the capital, which is part of what made it so exciting, is that they each have something important to them that they need to do here. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this video. I'll kind of lead you guys into the next one. One thing that we ended up finding out after this session was that Lorne was not going to be able to make it to our next session. So what I did was I ended up I let people do a little bit of build up and work on their main stuff, but I also created an entirely side quest that it's still kind of Easter eggs at things in the main story, but it did so in a way that Lorne wasn't going to be missing out too much, and it also explained his disappearance. And I'll explain all that in the next video. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will catch you next time.